All right. Hopefully everybody can see the screen. So yes, I am going to be sharing today about trauma and emotion regulation, the power to create a new you. Tanisha stole my tagline today, my niece, know thyself. So this is going to help anyone who wants to understand why maybe you have repeated patterns of behavior that you haven't wanted to repeat. I'm going to ask the question. Have you ever found yourself repeating cycles of behavior that you didn't want to repeat? I have. Have you ever found yourself just repeatedly doing things, thinking a certain way, behaving a certain way, and these were not behaviors or thoughts that you wanted to partake in, but you found yourself doing it anyway? I can't see the chat because I'm on another screen, but
Yeah.
if you like, let me know in the comment section if you have, or you can just say yes, because I want you to know it's not just you and it's not your fault. So tell somebody in the comment section, it's not just you and it's not your fault. So today we're going to talk about trauma and emotion regulation and maybe some ways we can help improve how we regulate our emotions and manage them. I'll get as far as I can. I think I have what, Larika, 60 minutes, something like that.
You got
So we'll go as far as
50 minutes.
okay. All right. So we'll go as far as we can, y'all. All right. So let's talk about what emotion regulation is. First of all, it's really important for us to understand. And yeah, we're talking about relationships earlier, and so emotion regulation, especially in the context of social situations, is really important for us to maintain those healthy relationships. And individuals who do have good interpersonal emotional regulation skills are better able to manage conflict. We're able to understand the perspectives of other people, and we're able to manage our own emotions. Okay. So that's going to be really critical in this whole process of learning how to improve relationships. Is going to involve our ability, our willingness to learn how to manage conflicts, aware of our own emotions, and also being willing to respect the perspectives of other people. So you may be wondering what this has to do with trauma. It has a lot to do with trauma. What I want us to understand today is that a lot of our behaviors really have nothing to do with who we are at the core of our being. So I'm going to talk about specifically not just trauma, but because we are people of color in this space, I want to talk to you about post-traumatic slave syndrome. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that or not. Let me know in the comments if you are or are not. Um, but this is a concept developed by Dr. Joy DeGruy. And so when she talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome, she's talking about a condition that exists when a population of people, in our case, that would be African Americans, have experienced multi-generational trauma. And so in our case, this results from our ancestors, our enslaved ancestors. And so this multi-generational trauma results from centuries of slavery and oppression, and then it continues to oppress those who are alive today and those who have to continue to experience institutionalized racism. And so then when you couple multi-generational trauma with continued oppression, as many of us in this country can allude to, we are still dealing with continued oppression today. And then, unlike other races, especially our white counterparts, we as people of color, we lack the opportunity to access some of the are available to other people groups in our country. So when you couple all those things together, it results in what she calls PTSS, or post-traumatic slave syndrome. And so when we think about history, history hasn't just affected our culture, but history has also affected our soul and our bodies. And when you understand trauma, you understand that your nervous system has been affected by the experience that you've endured. And so your body, your nervous system, your brain holds that trauma. Not only does your body and brain hold that trauma, but your body remembers that trauma. And guess what? Your body and your brain remembers trauma that you may not have even necessarily experienced yourself, which I'll talk about in just a second. And so then I began to ask, like, what are the impacts of generations of slavery and oppression? How does it affect us today? What are the effects of trauma on human beings, and what does trauma even look like, and how does it manifest itself? And so again, when you start to think about our enslaved ancestors and what they experienced and what they endured, it was a significant amount of trauma. And even though they're not alive today to tell us their story, we know historically that they endured trauma. So the problem for researchers was, like, how can we be sure that they endured trauma though, or PTSD. If you look in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Health Disorders, you can look at the signs and symptoms of trauma, and you can use that to pretty much hypothesize that our ancestors did indeed live with and suffered with PTSD. So just to give you a little bit of information about trauma criteria, because you may want to assess yourself a little bit today. I do every day. So when trauma is present, there's basically a criterion of a stressor that has to be available, right, in order to qualify it as a trauma. And so this means that the person was exposed to either death, exposed to threatened death, exposed to actual or threatened serious injury, or actual or threatened sexual violence. And so I want you to think about in your life if you've ever been exposed to any of those things, right? Probably everybody on this call has experienced some level of trauma. So only one of the following things has to be present in order for trauma to be sort of diagnosed. If you had direct exposure to the trauma, right? That means you experienced it yourself. Or did you know that you can also be traumatized if you witnessed somebody else's traumatic experience or event? So maybe you grew up in a household with abusive parents, or maybe the parents were abusing the spouse and didn't abuse you, but maybe you witnessed it every day. So if you witness somebody else being traumatized, you can also experience trauma from that. Third, indirectly. So that means if you learn that a close relative or a close friend of yours was exposed to trauma, that can also cause trauma within you, right? If the event involved death or threatened death, it had to have been witnessed. It must have been violent or accidental. So most of the time, if people die from, maybe a prolonged illness, that may not cause trauma, but those deaths and those violent situations that were those situations that were violent or accidental, those are considered traumas. And then fourth, repeated or extreme indirect exposure to aversive details of the event. So this means people who are in professional roles, your doctors, your nurses, your social workers, pastors, anyone who is in the helping profession, anyone who spends time having to professionally help other people who are enduring trauma, more than likely are victims, not victims, but are suffering with trauma as well. And so our African American enslaved ancestors, going back to them, we know they experienced multiple incidences of trauma based on the DSM-5 definition. So I want you to think about whether you may have experienced any of these. And I want you to let me know if you feel comfortable. Do any of you think that you have any type of trauma in your life? And if you could unmute yourself, that'd be great, because I can't see the chat bar because I'm on a different screen. Anybody want to say yes or no? Have you identified any possible trauma in your lives? Okay. I think I heard one yes. Okay.
Yes.
So, yes. Okay, great. So then we want to talk about epigenetics, right? Because epigenetics is amazing science. It's one of the new sciences, and it really reveals to us how trauma is transmitted. So we know now that our environment can absolutely influence our genetics. And more specifically, we know that trauma can be transmitted over generations. So if you are alive today, and if you are a Black person in the United States, you more than likely are holding some form of ancestral trauma in your body, in your nervous system today. So you may have heard this referred to as ancestral trauma or historical trauma or generational trauma. In the church, we kind of call it the generational curses. Anybody want to talk back to me? So from a scientific perspective, generational curses could also be understood through the lens of generational trauma, because we actually know now that we can inherit the traumatic experiences of our ancestors. In fact, we know through the science of epigenetics that life-threatening or traumatic experiences can literally alter the genetic coding of the offspring. Okay, and not only that, this ability to inherit this altered genetic coding it can also be transferred through many generations, as far back as 5 to 7 generations. So even though you were not alive when your enslaved ancestors were alive, there are multiple rapes that the women endured, the lynchings, and the women and their sisters, and the having to watch their husbands and brothers be lynched from trees. The physical abuse that our ancestors experienced, the exploitation, the oppression, the anti-human behavior, even the way our ancestors had to learn to respond to this abuse. A lot of times the slaves turned on each other because they were trying to protect themselves and their children. So they would snitch on each other. Even the way we had to worship, and I think is his name Christian, Mr. Reeves? He talked about that briefly too, just how we used to worship, and we had to go down into the woods, and we had to release a lot of that trauma through screaming and through hollering in the woods and through praying. And so we've adopted a lot of the behaviors, not just the trauma itself, but how we respond to trauma. Our inability to sometimes to communicate well. They had this session this morning on communication. So a lot of times the reason why we have poor interpersonal communication skills is because of the trauma that's in our nervous system that we were born with. Okay. So I want you to free yourself. It's not that there's something wrong with you necessarily. There's not that, you're not lovable or that you're not likable. But if we have not been educated, which many of us have not been, we may not understand why we're having trouble with our relationships. We have a 60% divorce rate in our country. There's reasons for that. Friends fall out and we never speak to each other ever again. We fall out over anything, the smallest of things. We never speak to each other again over it. People go to their graves never speaking again. And it's not that people don't love each other or don't care, but really in the African American community, we're not being educated about trauma and how trauma affects our interpersonal relationships. And so I hope that this gives you a little bit of enlightenment. And so the legacy of the trauma that our ancestors experienced is reflected again in our behaviors and our beliefs. And so our ancestors' brain and their nervous system was wired for trauma and survival. One of my favorite words is neuroplasticity. If you never heard that word, write it down, okay? Our brain and our nervous system, even though it can be wired for certain behaviors, it can also be changed. And that's the way I think God made us, and I'm grateful for that. So that means that even if our nervous systems are wired for fear, for survival, as our ancestors was, we have the ability today to change ourselves. And that's why I titled this or subtitled this, Creating a New You. So you don't have to stay that way. I need somebody to type it in the comment section. I can change. Okay. We've been taught that, especially if you have a fixed mindset. I don't know if you're familiar with Caroline Dweck's work, where she talks about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And some people have a mindset where they feel like, because I've been this way all my life, this is how I am. Raise your hand if you ever said that. Here go my hand, right? That's not true. Okay. Even if you were 30, 40, 50, your brain is still very malleable. And so it can change. It's going to require you to adjust your beliefs and adjust your behaviors and practice new beliefs and practice those new behaviors. But if you adjust your beliefs and you practice your beliefs over time, your brain will rewire itself. It'll send new messages to your nervous system. Your nervous system will restore itself, and you'll find yourself behaving in new ways. So just in case you're wondering if you've ever experienced trauma, here are some of the most common signs of trauma. I'll go through the list real quick. Recurrent or involuntary and intrusive thoughts. I want you to think about if you've experienced any of this, okay? Traumatic nightmares, okay? Dissociative reaction. So that looks like flashbacks, or sometimes, just falling out, losing consciousness, not remembering things, loss of memory, being numb, shutting down, repressed emotions, not feeling anything, not feeling connected. All of that is dissociative reactions. And then trauma-related thoughts or feelings. And so start thinking about what your thoughts look like. Because again, if you're thinking this internally, it's going to affect how you engage with people in your external world. So a lot of us are guarded. Who am I talking to? Y'all, don't leave me out here by myself, right? A lot of times we're guarded. We are suspicious of people. We've already decided how people feel about us. And so that's our internal world. And a lot of times that's coming from trauma related thoughts and feelings. But because we have not made the association, we may not even understand what's going on, right? We have these persistent and distorted negative beliefs about ourselves and other people. Who am I talking to? Right? We have really high expectations for people. We expect people to do what we think they should do. Oftentimes, this is trauma. These are trauma responses. We have negative beliefs and expectations about the world. I know this is not a theology class, Larika, but I think a lot about what we do in the church. I think about my own experience in ministry and in my theological beliefs, and how a lot of times we have these negative beliefs, and we associate that somehow to God. And I can't help but wonder how much of our theology is even based off of trauma responses, right? And so things like persistent, distorted blame of self and other people. Have you ever done that? Where you blamed yourself all the time? If things didn't work out, it's your fault, right? Or if things didn't work out, it's somebody else's fault, right? And when that blame gets distorted, when it's really stretched and not fair and not real, oftentimes that's a trauma response as well. If you sometimes have diminished interest in things that you used to be interested in, and this is specifically if you've experienced a trauma in your lifetime. So not even thinking about, post-traumatic syndrome, but if you have experienced your own traumatic experience prior to that event, were there things that you were interested in or that you liked that you no longer have an interest or desire in, right? And then we think about the feeling of alienation, feeling like you're alone. This is where a lot of times depression kicks in, and isolation and loneliness, and feeling like you're just misunderstood, right? Self-destructive and or reckless behavior. We see that a lot in the African American community because we don't like to talk about mental health in our community. And so we see a lot of self-destructive behavior because we're not understanding how to trauma. And so we end up doing self-destructive things. We have problems concentrating. I think Larika talked about ADHD. I have it too. Sometimes I wonder how much of that is also just something I inherited through generational trauma. And then sleep disturbance, which is something I really, really struggle with. I really have had a hard time sleeping for all my life, basically. So a lot of this is just trauma responses. So I wanted to just bring your attention to that so you can kind of start to know thyself, as Tanisha said earlier. Let's get to know ourselves. Let's understand what's happening on the inside. A lot of times as Black people, especially as Black women, because I think it's just us Black sisters left now, right? We have been made to feel like we need to be strong all the time, right? So that strong Black woman schema. Do y'all know that most of us who operate in that superwoman mentality, that overachiever mentality, we high expectations, perfectionism, oftentimes those are trauma responses. Okay. It is because we feel like we have to hide behind that mask of perfection because we don't feel safe exposing our infirmities and our inner struggles. But I hope today that we are beginning to create a safe space where we can have these conversations. So now we're going to move into the brain a little bit more. I don't want to make this into a neuroscience. Yes.
Vanessa, this is Tanisha.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so you mentioned about the interrupted sleep patterns as a part of like the trauma.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit more? If you have a few moments.
Yeah, because so when we think about our nervous system, you have your automatic nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system, and they're supposed to work together. They're supposed to keep us harmonized and in balance, right? But when we have experienced trauma, when we start experiencing trauma and we're not treating the trauma, the brain starts creating a whole lot of drugs, like a pharmacy. It's like a pharmacy. The brain starts creating a whole lot of drugs, cortisol and steroids. And then those drugs inside those drugs are messengers, little messengers, and they carry information into the various parts of our nervous system. And a lot of those, it goes into our amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's responsible for processing our emotions. And so now our brain is heightened with all these chemicals that we've produced because of the stress. All right. So now we got a heightened brain. So now we're hypervigilant. Our brain is like, nope, stay awake because you're in trouble. So the brain is all it's perceiving threat, it's perceiving danger, and it's happening most of the time in an unconscious way. So you don't even realize what's going on, because we get real good at hiding this stuff. But your brain thinks that you are in some kind of danger. Your brain thinks that you need to be safe. Your brain has you in flight or fear. Your brain has you very, very heightened. And so when the brain is heightened like that, that means that your brain is also not creating enough melatonin. Y'all know what melatonin is, right? That's why they sell the melatonin in the store. So now your brain is like hyper vigilant. Your brain is hyper. It's creating all these drugs. So now the part of your brain that produces the melatonin that makes you sleepy and makes you tired and sends a message to your body that you're tired, it's time to go to bed, that part's not working. And so your brain thinks that you're supposed to stay up all the time. And that's where that's coming from. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yes, it does.
Okay. So right here, we're talking about the brain. So this is a great segue. So the brain has difficulties separating fantasies from facts. So that's going to really address your question too, Tanisha. So again, the brain doesn't know the difference. You may not be in any danger. You may be in the safety of your home, sleeping with your husband or with the people you love and trust. You physically, you're in a safe space, but think about that past trauma. If you experienced trauma 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and you never resolved it, you never got help for it, you never treated it, okay? Your brain, because we have another part of the brain that's responsible for memory and regulating our memory, your brain is sending messages that you're still in danger from something that happened moons ago, right? And so your brain doesn't know the difference between what's fantasy, what's fact. You have to help your brain understand that through conscious engagement with those parts of your brain. So your brain doesn't know that you're not in danger from something that happened 20 years ago. So your brain is like, we got to stay up just in case something happens, right? So when a person is dealing with trauma, we tend to either be trapped in the past, which is when we end up with depression, or we tend to be trapped in trying to project the future, which is what causes anxiety. So we're trapped somewhere between depression and anxiety. How can you sleep when your brain is trapped in those two dimensions like that? Right.
Yes.
So the brain will, does that make sense, y'all? And so
it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. So then the brain starts seeing things that's not there. Sometimes it sees things that are, sometimes it doesn't see things that are there. So this is where we end up with kind of like delusional behavior, schizophrenic behavior. Because again, and a lot of these things can be prevented if we educate. But if we allow this to go on for too long, the brain will get so damaged that it shuts down and it doesn't function properly. And so what happens is the brain doesn't even try to create a detailed map of what's going on in your external world. Your brain is like, forget all that. We don't have time to be trying to figure stuff out, because your brain, again, is trying to protect you from more trauma. So you know what your brain starts to do? Your brain just uses cues. And then it just fills in the rest with conjecture, fantasy, and belief. And I think we've all done this. We have all over-exaggerated something that happened. Anybody gonna raise their hand? Is it just me? Don't leave me out here by myself, right? We've all experienced something and we really didn't have all the details, but the trauma response kicked in. We got triggered. Our brain was like, wait a minute, this reminds me of what happened to you 45 years ago, 10 years ago. So let's gear up. Let's get in defense mode, because we got to protect ourselves because danger is coming, right? And so then we start making up stuff. We start with conjecture. We fantasize things, and our brain thinks that it's really real. This is when we have to understand belief, because belief is more powerful than most people understand. Belief can work for you or it can work against you. Okay. I can believe that I'm a size 12, and eventually if I believe that I might eat to the place that I actually be a size 12, right? So belief is powerful, but belief can also be detrimental, especially to people who have experienced trauma. Our beliefs color everything which we come in contact with, right? So whatever you believe about a situation or a person or a construct, if you believe it, then it's true for you, even if it's not. Okay. You can listen to people tell the most fantastical stories, things that never ever happened, but because their brain is wired to believe that because of some either some exposure to trauma or just because they practice that belief long enough, you think that it's really true. So then beliefs determine what we perceive and how we evaluate situations, how we evaluate our life, right? How we evaluate our relationships. Beliefs determine what we consider unlikely and what we consider possible. So beliefs shape our memories as well as our expectations, right? And so, but if your memory center again is filled with a bunch of traumatic memories, you are in a state of hypervigilance. You don't trust. Anybody got trust issues? You ain't got to tell nobody, right? People who don't have trust issues, people who battle with rejection. A lot of times these are trauma responses, and so I just don't want you beating yourself up. It's more than likely because you have some unresolved trauma. The thing about beliefs, if they are maladaptive, though, they can color our minds to the point that we become numb, right? And when we become numb, like at a neuroscience level, at a brain level, if our nervous system, because that's what's becoming numb, it's not you. It's not that you don't care. It's not that you are not friendly. It's not that you're not loving. Okay, because some of y'all been told those things about yourself. I'm trying to heal somebody today. I'm trying to free somebody. It's not even that. It's that your parasympathetic nervous system has been damaged through trauma, and for many of us, it's been more than one traumatic experience. And so now your nervous system is like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna check out. We just gonna shut down. Anybody ever been there? Your nervous system, like, you know what? We're not even getting ready to deal with nothing. Okay, we just gonna check out. And so then you're not able to move beyond that level of numbness. Have you ever been there when you just could not move beyond the place you were at? Like you wanted to do better, you wanted to do different, you really did, but you just could not bring yourself to do it. You can't because that numbness paralyzes the part of your brain that helps you make choices. So when you see people, this is how people get strung out on drugs, y'all. This is how people end up in abusive cycles. I used to work at the domestic violence center years ago, and these women would come in, mostly women, a couple of men came in too, and they would have, black eyes and bruises, and I would go with them to the court and they would ask for the restraining order, and I would start the process of trying to get them in a safe space, only for them to call me back and say, never mind. Or for them to just be no show, and they go right back to that abusive partner, right? No judgment, because that's what happens when you experience so much trauma. Your nervous system starts to think that this is normal for you. And so then your entire nervous system changes to adjust itself to that traumatic way of living. This is why some people can be, their baseline for normality may be completely abnormal or maladaptive, but they've lived that way for so long, they are numb to that and they can't move beyond that place. Even the Bible explains that in Proverbs 23:7. I know I'm not here to preach, but it says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So your heart, not just your physical heart that's beating, but your entire nervous system, that inner part of yourself, if it gets stuck in that numbness, you can't move, right? It blinds all of your potential. There are people on Skid Row right now that are geniuses. Y'all understand what I'm saying? There are brain surgeons who experienced some kind of trauma and they just couldn't move beyond it. And now they're downtown San Francisco homeless. They can't move beyond that place. So I don't know if you're going through something today, or maybe your life is not where you want it, but it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because potentially your nervous system has been so stressed and so damaged and so traumatized that you cannot move out of that space. I don't know if I can see this, but if you want a resource, I'm going to try to remember to give you some more resources. But before if you want to get this book right here, it's called The Body Keeps the Score. Brain, Mind, and Body and the Healing of Trauma. This is an excellent resource for anybody who's experienced trauma so that you can understand why we tend to sometimes get so stuck and we can't move. If you've ever said in your life, I'm stuck, let me know. Somebody unmute themselves real quick and say me. Or maybe it's just me that's been stuck. Right? So when we've been stuck, that is because there is trauma in our nervous system, in our brain, and in our body that won't give us the energy to move beyond that, right? So we sometimes just kind of wander aimlessly and we remain disconnected from our possibilities, okay? And there are infinite possibilities all around us, but if we're traumatized and numb, we can't even move towards those possibilities. So we talked about, you all talked about emotional intelligence earlier. And so I want to talk about emotion regulation because emotion regulation refers to the typical or dispositional ways in which we understand, regard, and respond to our emotional experiences. And so in order to be emotionally intelligent, we have to make sure that this trauma is healed first, because emotional intelligence has nothing to do with how intelligent you are or are not. It has nothing to do with your innate abilities. But if you're traumatized, you're not going to be able, again, to move into a realm of emotional intelligence. So when we think about healing the trauma, some of the things I would suggest, first of all, obviously would be therapy, is my first suggestion. And not just like any therapist, but somebody who really specializes in probably neuroscience and therapists who understand the brain. And in some cases, you may even want to talk to a psychiatrist, because a psychiatrist really understands what's going on inside the body and the brain and the nervous system when you've been traumatized. And they can prescribe, drugs to help regulate your nervous system. But there are some holistic things that you can also do. I practice a lot of holistic practices. I'm going to be very transparent. I have a lot of mental health diagnoses. I am, like my niece, I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD, but not only that, I've been diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And so there is a lot going on, in me mentally. And I would have hid that from people years ago. In fact, for decades, I hid my depression from everybody. Not even my family knew how dark I was, the dark place I was in with depression and suicide thoughts and all those things. Because in the Black community, we don't want to talk about that. We sweep it under the rug, we shout over it, we dance over it, we don't talk about it. But I want you all to know that suicide is the third leading cause of death for Black men, and it's slowly becoming the leading cause of death for our young Black women too, because we don't talk about it. And so people don't have a safe space to unpack what's happening. A lot of times these things can be avoided or prevented just through education. And so some of the things you can do just from a holistic perspective, deep breathing techniques. I don't have time to go into what that looks like. You can Google some stuff, but like diaphragmic breathing, if you learn how to breathe consciously from your diaphragm and learning how to do that breath work, it really will help to regulate your nervous system. It'll move those toxins out of your nervous system. So write that down, y'all. Diaphragmic breathing. Meditation is a 100% effective way to recover from trauma, manage trauma. So learn meditation. Don't be afraid of meditation. And you don't have to practice meditation from an Eastern perspective if that makes you nervous. If I know most of you probably are Christian. So meditate on the word if that makes you feel safer. But what meditation is, and I might be jumping ahead of myself because I think I have a screen on mindfulness, but you're really just trying to train your mind to be in the present. Because again, when we're dealing with trauma and depression, when we're dealing with trauma, we're talking about either being stuck in the past, which is going to cause you to be depressed, or we're so anxious about the future. So then there's the anxiety. What we never do is we never live in the present moment. So we're not even able to enjoy life. So meditation, specifically mindfulness meditation, just a few minutes of that a few times a day over time will help to regulate your nervous system. So I meditate 4 or 5 times a day. And it's usually about 5 minutes each session because ain't nobody got time for all that meditating. But we know that 5 minutes of meditation over time will begin to restore your nervous system and begin to diminish the trauma. Why? Because it's going to help you to create some new pathways in your brain, which is what we want. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, which is a set of skills that allows us to be mindful of not just our own emotions, but other people's as well, we're also talking about self-awareness. So again, knowing thyself, being aware of your own emotions, what your own triggers are. A lot of times, again, our relationships get disrupted because we don't even know what's going on with us. And one of the things I'm trying to practice is, my decision to not be offended. I'm trying to help somebody as I help myself, right? We can choose to be offended, or we can choose to ask ourselves, is there a better way for me to respond to what just happened? Okay, that's an example of what self-awareness looks like, so that we don't always operate in offense, right? Also, understanding and accepting our emotions. All right. I know we talked about emotions earlier, and a lot of times, especially as African Americans and especially as women, we've been shamed for our emotions. Listen, your emotions are a spiritual gift. You might not have heard that before, but it is. Okay. Your emotions help you to become more self aware. Your emotions help you to connect with other people. Emotions is what makes you a human being. So we got to learn how to stop being ashamed of our emotions. And we're not going to always be in an upbeat mood all the time, and that's okay. We walk around with these masks on, thinking that we have to. I'm one of those people that I don't smile a whole lot, and I have been, people are like, why don't you smile? Put a smile on your face. How many people have heard that before, right? Which is a trauma response. You heard that before? Which is a trauma response, by the way, from the African American community, because this is what the slave masters used to beat us and then make us smile and dare us to cry, right? So we need to be okay with all of our emotions, right? Because it helps you to come into the knowledge of self. If I am feeling a little bit down today, one of the things you can do is ask yourself, why am I feeling this thing today? Write that down, y'all. Instead of you trying to sweep it under the rug and put a fake smile on your face, okay? Ask yourself, wait a minute. And something else that we don't do as Black people, we don't check in with our body. But slow down a little bit, which is why I love meditation and mindfulness. Because of our heritage and our culture, again, we're really used to being very hyper vigilant. So we like to dance and we like the loud music, we like to shout, and those things are great. But I encourage you sometimes just to slow down and stop ignoring what your body is trying to tell you, because your feelings are a part of your body and your nervous system. And if you take the time to get in touch with your feelings, it can help you understand what's going on. And this is your way of your brain and your mind trying to show you something that you might be missing. So pay attention to your body and pay attention to your moods. And what I like to tell people to do is get to know them, name them, give your mood a name, right? Give your mood a name. Okay. When you have the blues, give it a name. Call her Judy. Okay. And when Judy shows up, instead of you trying to push her away and ignore her, invite her to sit down with you. Judy, what's up? What's going on? Why are you here today? What do you want me to know? What do I need to know? You'd be surprised how this opens you up and makes you more, not just self-aware, but it makes you more aware of other people and their emotions as well. The ability to control behaviors when experiencing emotional distress. So again, because of our traumas, when we experience emotional situations or distressing situations, again, we have these wired responses, right? We run, we numb out, we go off, all the things. We shut down, all the things, y'all. I know I can't be the only one, right? But again, these are traumatic responses, and they're hardwired into your nervous system. And if you don't make a conscious decision to break those cycles of behavior, guess what? Your brain is going to think that's how you want to be. That's how you want to live. So your brain will be like, okay, we're going to just keep doing that. So we got to train ourselves to be able to identify these distressing responses and behaviors so we can change them. This is why I admonish everyone to journal. I keep journals around me, child. Let me tell you. I got journals for days. Anybody else? I know I'm not the only one. Am I the only one? Nope. I got journals for days. Listen, go to the dollar store and get you about 10 journals, okay? And put one everywhere. Put one in your home office, your car, everywhere, under your pillow, because writing, we know that writing heals. Writing is therapeutic. So when you feel yourself having those traumatizing response behaviors to distressing situations, take a few minutes. In my trauma course I created, I have something called the rest method. It's a 60-second recovery method where you can just stop and be like, okay, let's take 60 seconds and let's evaluate this situation, right? So that you don't continue repeating emotional or distressing behaviors and reactions. So then we do need access to emotion regulation strategies. So I'm trying to give you some of those today, but also do your own research and just research what are some ways that I can regulate my emotions, right? So that I don't go off on people, so that I don't, intentionally or unintentionally hurt people, so that I don't hurt myself. I'm talking to somebody because some of us have self-abusive tendencies that we need to heal from, where you treat other people better than you treat yourself. You can just go ahead and say amen in private, okay? So we got to heal that too. And then willingness to experience emotional distress as a part of pursuing meaningful activities in life. That's something that I'm working on, y'all, because for most of my life, I really just didn't have meaningful activities. I was just in church, and that was basically my life. Because church was a safe place for me to just hide a lot of my trauma, a lot of my emotional and mental distresses. And so I just hid in church. I was just busy in church. I know I'm not the only one, just busy. And so I really didn't have meaningful activities that I could pursue. And so I'm in a season of my life where I'm just trying to pursue meaning to my life. And I think a lot of you need to do that. And maybe church wasn't your thing, but you know what? You're a workaholic. Okay, just go ahead on and be free. Okay, maybe you're a workaholic. Maybe you just out here serving everybody else. Where my Martha's at? Is it Martha or Mary Tanisha? Which one is it? Was it Martha? Busy bee? Right? So maybe you just out here, you're just taking care of everybody else, making sure everybody else is good. But when is the last time you checked on yourself? When is the last time you checked to make sure that you were good? Okay. So I want you to start thinking about some meaningful activities that you can bring into your life. Are there any questions so far? Anybody want to stop me and say anything? Can y'all still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm just making sure. Y'all so quiet. I'm making sure y'all can still hear me. All right. So if there's no questions, I'm going to keep going. So let's talk about just some quick ways we can improve our emotional intelligence, right? And I've kind of already said these, but anyway. So recognize your emotions and name them, as I just said. Name them, okay? Get real familiar. That's something that I've been doing for a very long time, and I mess up. Okay, I mess up, and I know I mess up, but I'm trying, y'all. Is anybody trying? Come on, let's
Yeah.
encourage ourselves. Thank you. Okay. Let's encourage ourselves. We mess up, but we trying. Tell somebody in the chat, yeah, I messed up, but I'm trying. I'm trying. And so one of the things you can do is, again, get that journal. Okay. They cost $1 and just start. I have this thing that I work with my clients on, and it's called a thought record journal. Okay. And I make them get a journal, and they have to label it their thought record journal. And they start recording their thoughts. They start recording their emotions. They start recording their behaviors and their actions. Can y'all promise me that y'all will get you a thought record journal sometime this weekend, right? And just start paying attention to your thoughts throughout your day. Start paying attention to your emotions throughout your day, and start paying attention to how you're responding throughout your day, and record that stuff. Maybe you won't be able to do it all, but just record a few things throughout the day and then name it. Okay, personalize that stuff. Why is that important? Because that's your way of letting your brain and your nervous system know these things are not me. Oh my God, these things are not me. I might have a bad attitude, but I'm not a bad attitude. Oh, y'all, come on here. My bad attitude's name is Nancy. Okay, she's not me. That's an aspect of me because of some perceived belief I have about myself, because of some defense mechanism I have, maybe because of some issue I had growing up. But it's really important that you start naming these aspects of you, your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors, so that you don't make the mistake of thinking that those things are you. Because let me tell you something, People will do that to you and you will do it to yourself. People will start making you think that you are that thing, that you are that behavior, that you are that emotion, that you are that thought. But I need you to hear me today that that is not who you are. Okay. And once you start recording these things in a journal, then the next thing I tell people to do is do a lifeline. Somebody write in the comment section for me, lifeline. Listen, get you a piece of paper. Okay. I want you to get I have all these journals, y'all. I be losing them. I have to start over with a new journal. That's because I'm all over the place. But anyway, get you a piece of paper like this. I want you to turn it the long way. Can y'all see it? Can everybody see the piece of paper? Yes, yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Get you a piece of paper, child. Turn it the long way. Get you a pen like this. Take the pen and draw a line straight across the piece of paper like this. Right? You see that? And at the top, I want you to write this. My lifeline. Okay, right at the top, you're gonna put my lifeline. And then you're gonna come to the end of the paper, right over here on the left-hand side. Is this my left side? No, this is my right side. Sorry, y'all. You're gonna come all the way to the end. And you're gonna start with the earliest memories of your life, good, bad, or indifferent. And you're gonna just start making some notes. So I'm gonna make up some stuff. Maybe at the age of 3, you remember scraping your knee. Scrape knee at 3. And then, so I want you to do this all the way across until the age you are today. All right. Just whatever memories come up. Don't try to think about it. Don't overthink about it. Just whatever comes up for you and write. And then I want you to go back to each one of those memories, right? And underneath, I want you to ask yourself, what were the circumstances around that event that happened? What happened before? What happened after? Right? What's going to happen is you're going to start seeing a pattern. Somebody say a pattern. You're going to start noticing a pattern that has happened throughout your life. Okay. And I know y'all talked earlier today about attachment styles, right? And we all have one of those 4 attachment styles. And Larika says she's going to do a part 2, so I won't get into it too much. But we all have an attachment style. And we learned early in life based on our environment, whoever raised us, whoever was around us, whoever made us feel safe, whoever made us not feel safe. We learn ways to attach to our and to other people. And when you do your lifeline, it's going to help you to understand how you attach to people today. And of course, you can always do those attachment style quizzes and learn your official attachment style. But this is also good because you're going to start seeing a pattern of behavior. And what we know is the first 7 to 10 years of our life really dictates who we are as adults. So I would at least say for the first go round, do this for the first 7 to 10 years of your life and just stop and take a look. And you're going to be like, oh my God. You're going to be like, oh my God. I remember, and this is real personal, but I remember when I was 8 years old and my mama gave me a birthday party. It was outside. It was my birthday. My birthday's in August. It was hot. But she gave me permission to find my own clothes that day. And I went and found some clothes, child, an outfit, and I washed them by hand because we know we was raised in the country, right? Tanisha, Larika. This is before y'all even came to the house. I washed my clothes outside that day by hand, hung my clothes up on the line to dry. Now, I'll be honest, the outfit was a little hot for August weather. Okay, let's just be clear. I had on a pair of green corduroys. Y'all might be too young to know what those are. And a green turtleneck. But that's what I wanted to wear. It was a very hot outfit. But I remember going outside and people just laughing at me because I had on this outfit. And when I did the lifeline, that was one of the first memories that came up for me. And this was years ago when I did this exercise. And I remember that was the first time that I knew what shame was. Okay. That was the first time I knew what it was to be shame and feel ashamed and shrink, because I felt myself shrinking and feeling very embarrassed and it kind of created this sense of, shame within me. And so I carried that with me into my adulthood, where I just assumed that whenever I showed up, that people were going to laugh and that I was doing something that was worthy of shame. So, but then it also helped me to understand how to rework that and how to reframe that. Right. We call that cognitive reappraisal, where you have to learn how to reframe your thoughts okay? Because you can have those vain imaginations. Somebody talk to me, right? And your imaginations can get away from you and you can start thinking crazy. Y'all come on here, right? And so you have to learn how to reframe your vain imaginations so that you don't end up talking yourself out of situations just because of what's going on inside of your inner world, right? Ask for feedback. That's hard for us as Black women. Anybody gonna be honest? It's hard for us to ask for help, and it is hard for us to ask for feedback. Why? Because we are wired for perfection, because we're trying to survive. We need to be seen as perfect. Why? Because we have inherited through altered genetic coding a belief that we're not good enough, that we're not worthy, that we're not perfect enough. And so we're always striving for perfection. I need some people to be honest. And so we're always trying to dodge critique, and we don't really want feedback because we're afraid that you might point out something that makes us feel a little bit too imperfect. And so we don't oftentimes ask for feedback. Okay. I need you to heal that. Okay. Everybody needs to love themselves enough to be able to receive the feedback from other people, even if the feedback is not what you want to hear. Why? Because other people's perceptions of you should not have the power to define you. I'm trying to help somebody. And then a third thing you can do towards improving emotional intelligence, read. I heard Tanisha talking about reading earlier. Read literature. Read information. I was so excited when I started reading something other than the Bible, y'all. Leave me alone. Don't judge me, okay? I didn't read nothing else for years. Is all I read was the Bible, the Bible, the Bible, the Bible, the Bible. Nothing wrong with reading the Bible, but I had no idea that there was so much other knowledge out here. I had no idea there was so much other information and things that could revolutionize my life and my relationships and just who I was as a person. So I encourage you to read literature. I know a lot of times we as African Americans, because we are raised in the church, a lot of times we're in these sort of restrictive religions, and sometimes we feel like, okay, I can't read that because it's something will happen to me or a demon gonna get in me. Listen, I need you to trust yourself and the God within you, and trust God that you love. Ain't nothing gonna get in you, okay? Expand your knowledge and read and educate yourself so that you can understand what's happening to you. Read more about mindfulness. Read more about meditation. Read more about your nervous system. The Bible says you're fearfully and wonderfully made, but nobody ever tells us how. And so today I'm just trying to share with you some ways how. How much time I got, Rika? Because I forgot what time I started.
You got about 3 minutes.
Wow, that went by so fast.
Yeah.
Okay, it goes by fast. Okay. And so a lot of this stuff I've already done anyway, so it's okay. And I was going to just give you all some references here. There, I was going to talk about the emotion and how it plays a role in our relationships. Again, attachment style, personality traits, emotional intelligence. We talked about gender earlier today. And then these are just some resources. Some resources if you are interested in ways that you can kind of work on healing your nervous system. There are some apps. If you want to take a screenshot of that or take a picture, Headgear, Mood Prism, Mood Kit, Catch It, Pacifica, Mood Hacker. Here are some resources for you to help you on your journey. Just in case you don't feel comfortable going to a therapist right now, these are some excellent alternatives and options for you. And I think that'll do it for me, Larika. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Uh-oh. I lost